Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Occult Think Tank. My name is Greg. In this program, I am going to be doing part 2 of Battles Beneath the Earth. There will be a second unedited version of this on my BitChute, as well as an audio version of the unedited on my website, occultthinktank.com, because there's some things that I'm going to go into in this video that I dare not put on YouTube. But my commentary on this will be at the end. Battles Beneath the Earth, Part 2. Norio Hayakawa is the head of the Civilian Intelligence Network. Mr. Hayakawa was one of several individuals, including a Japanese film crew from the Nippon Television Network in Japan, who witnessed and videotaped a flight maneuver of a brightly lit orange-yellowish light making extremely unorthodox flight patterns, including sudden acceleration, descension, and ascension, possibly exerting a force of multiple Gs under extremely limited space and time, and even zigzag-type movements, while on a field trip to an area just outside of Area 51 in Nevada on Wednesday, February 21, 1990. There were approximately 25 to 28 individuals in the group who also witnessed the display. His brother-in-law, Itsuro Izukawa, also photographed the object as it was in flight. With over 30 years of in-depth UFO investigative experience, Norio was instrumental in the subsequent production of a 2-hour documentary program televised throughout Japan on March 24, 1990. The entire program dealt with Area 51, and also the crew's pursuit of an alleged biogenic laboratory in New Mexico, that is, the Dulce facility. It is his contention that what could only be described as highly intelligent and deceptive ultra-dimensional infernal entities, materializing in disguise as aliens, are collaborating with a secret world government that is preparing, barring unexpected circumstances, to ingeniously stage a contact landing in 1995 to bring about a new world order. Furthermore, Mr. Hayakawa contends that the Grand Deception, which will be orchestrated in a Russia-backed Arab Confederacy's attempt to invade Israel, simultaneous worldwide earthquakes, worldwide stock market crash, and a sudden mysterious evacuation of a segment of population, all of which will culminate in a quick official formation of a new world order that will last for 7 years upon its inception. Norio's views are similar to those which we have revealed through these files. The non-physicals do exist and play a powerful role in the scenario. But we would of course also include the reptilian agenda, as well as being ultimately orchestrated by the Infernals. Norio also explains that the Grand Deception and the shocking series of events will put millions and millions of people worldwide in an absolute stupor for months, during which time a special, extremely effective, multi-leveled mind control program will be activated to calm down the stunned populace. According to Mr. Hayakawa, the countdown for this stunning event of 1995 began in 1948. He is convinced that we are living in a 7-year warning period which began in 1988, when Israel celebrated its 40th anniversary of statehood. Hayakawa himself has appeared on Japanese television, has lectured considerably, has appeared on radio stations in Phoenix, Arizona, and has been the subject of an article in the Arizona Republic, has published articles in the U.S. Japanese Business News, March of 1990, was the guest on a Japanese talk show in March and April of 1990, and also the Telegram Happening on KVEG of Las Vegas several times in early 1990. He was also interviewed on the Anthony J. Hinder Show of Radio Free America aired in Anchorage, Alaska, during all of which he spoke extensively about his interesting beliefs concerning the origin and nature of UFOs. In a letter dated January 28, 1991, Norio added the following comments concerning the Dulce facility and its possible connection with the mystery of iniquity of Bible prophecy. I've been to Dulce with the Nippon Television Network crew and interviewed many people over there and came back with the firm conviction that something was happening around 10 to 15 years ago over there, including nightly sightings of strange lights and appearances of military jeeps and trucks. And I am convinced that the Four Corners area is a highly occult area. The only stretch of highway, namely Highway 666, runs through the Four Corners area from southeast Arizona to northwest New Mexico and up. I have also heard that this Highway 666 came into existence around 1947 or 1948, fairly close to the time of 1947, the modern-day beginning of the overt UFO appearance, i.e. the Kenneth Arnold incident, and coincidentally or not, the establishment of Israel in 1948. Paul Benowitz sent out a letter on June 6, 1988, describing Project Beta, which he referred to the alien base in New Mexico, consisting of type gray alien. NASA CIR film had allegedly aided in locating this base and revealing the U.S. military involvement with the Greys. Another group called the Orange is said to be based below the west slope of Mount Archuleta near the Diamond. Note: some suggest that the Orange are a so-called hybrid race with partial reptilian-like features yet possessing human-like reproductive organs. Possibly they consist of hybrids and rebrids, or rather some or many of them may possess a human soul matrix and therefore may be human. They've also been described as being involved in the scenarios taking place in the tunnels below the Nevada military complex as well. William Cooper briefly mentioned the Orange based on memories of top-secret documents he had read. There were 4 types of aliens mentioned in the papers: a large-nosed gray, reptoids; a blonde human-like type described as the Nordic; a red-haired human-like type called the Orange. The homes of the aliens were described as being a star in the constellation Orion, Barnard's star, and Zeta Reticuli 1 and 2. I cannot remember, even under hypnosis, which alien belongs to which star. The following is taken from an article by Tal, titled "The Covert Return of an Alien Species of Reptilian Heritage, the Dulce Base," which appeared in the Mailer newsletter described by researcher Patrick O'Connell. According to Tal, ages ago a conflict with the other beings, L's, destroyed most of their reptoid civilization, which forced some into deep caverns and others to leave the earth, to Alpha Draconis and or Altar in the constellation of Aquila, which in ancient lore was associated with evil reptilian creatures. The conflict is a species war between the Evidamic seed and the serpent, Draconian seed. Under cover of darkness, with bases hidden inside the earth, this nocturnal invader has chosen to reclaim what was once theirs and use it, and us, as a staging area in their ancient conflict with the L's. Note, that is, reclaim that which the serpent race wants us to believe was once theirs. The L's, as we have said, the so-named Elders, brothers, a human race tied to the Evidamic heritage, yet who have attained or retained a very tall physical stature. Humans with alien brain implants, the zombies, have been programmed to help overthrow mankind in the near future, 1992 to 1995. The reptoids are even able to transform themselves into beings with human characteristics and features. The planet Earth is being stressed so that the human resistance will be minimal during the overt takeover and control of mankind. It started as a joint interaction program. An alien species wanted to share parts of its advanced technology with certain humans in key positions of power within government, military, corporations, secret societies, etc. The population as a whole began to be manipulated into the alien agenda. They wanted total control of us. The majority of the article from here on is a repeat of an earlier article on the Dulce base by Bill Hamilton and Tal. However, this one, written exclusively by Tal, contained a few items which were not clearly dealt with in the previous article. TC had also seen tall reptilian humanoids at the base. This is interesting to me, Tal, because in 1979 I came face to face with the over 6 foot tall other species, reptoids, which materialized in our home. They took blood from my wife, who is an Rh negative blood type, and her daughter, who was 1,500 miles away. We all came to know that the visitors were here to stay. We also learned how the reptilian race was returning to Earth, and the Greys, who are mercenaries, were being used to interface with and manipulate humans. Their demonic agenda was to keep the Earth surface man confused and unaware of their true nature and potential. Also, the knowledge of vast and varied civilizations living within the Earth. The fantastic truth was made to seem a fantasy, a legend, a myth, an illusion. The reptoids are returning to Earth and using it as a staging area in their ancient conflict with the Elohim, angelics, and the Almighty Creator. The Adamic race has underground bases within Mars. They are a warrior cult culture. There is a vast network of tube shuttle connections under the U.S., which extends into a global system of tunnels and subcities. Note, they, reptilians, do not consider themselves aliens. They claim Terra, third from the sun, was their home before we humans arrived. Note, they have originated on Earth and developed from early ceroids. Yet there is much evidence that their claim that this is their planet is merely propaganda designed to get us to give up our God-given right to it. As a species, Tao continues, the reptilian heritage beings, the Greys, reptoids, winged dragos with 2 horns, the classic stereotype of the devil, are highly analytical and technically oriented. They are seriously into the sciences of automation, computers, and bioengineering, genetics. However, their exploits in these areas has led to reckless experimentation, with total disregard for ethics, moral standards, and empathy. This is also true of many of the human beings working with them. Tal then describes something which might seem unbelievable if it weren't for the fact that dozens of other sources seem to confirm it. This discovery was allegedly one of the real reasons for the incitation of the Dulce Wars. Level 7 is the worst. Row after row of thousands of humans and human mixture remains in cold storage. Here too are embryos of humanoids in various stages of development. Also, many human children's remains in storage vats. Who were these people? The sources for these incredibly disturbing allegations, aside from Thomas C. himself, according to Tal, include people who worked in the labs, abductees taken to the base, people who assisted in the construction, intelligence personnel, NSA, CIA, etc., and UFO inner-Earth researchers. This information, Tal states, is meant for those who are seriously interested in the Dulce base. For your own protection, be advised to use caution while investigating this complex. Commander X added some further details that he had uncovered. The underground base outside of Dulce, New Mexico, is perhaps one of the most frequently referred to. Its existence is most widely known, including several UFO abductees who have apparently been taken there for examination, then either managed to escape or were freed just in the nick of time by friendly forces. According to UFO conspiracy buff and ex-naval intelligence officer Milton William Cooper, a confrontation broke out between the human scientists and the aliens at the Dulce underground lab. The aliens took many of our scientists hostage. Delta forces were sent in to free them, but they were no match for the alien weapons. 66 people were killed during this action. As a result, we withdrew from all joint projects for at least 2 years. Centuries ago, surface people, some say the Illuminati, entered into a pact with an alien nation hidden within the earth, Commander X alleges. The U.S. government in 1933 agreed to trade animals in exchange for high-tech knowledge and to allow them to use undisturbed underground bases in western USA. A special group was formed to deal with the alien beings. In the 1940s, alien life forms, ALF, began shifting their focus of operations from Central and South America to the USA. The continental divide is vital to these entities. Part of this has to do with magnetics, substrata rock, and high-energy states, plasma. This area has a very high concentration of lightning activity, underground waterways, cavern systems, and fields of atmospheric ions, etc. One more note. The symbol for the Dulce base that is worn on many of the workers there allegedly consists of an upside-down triangle or pyramid with an upside-down T superimposed over it. William Hamilton added a few components in his book Cosmic Top Secret that did not appear in the UFO Universe article co-authored with Tao. These include: Schofield Clinical Laboratories in Albuquerque analyzed the samples of the affected hides of the cattle studied by Gomez and Burgess. They found significant deposits of potassium and magnesium. The potassium content was 70 times above normal. Level 1 of the Dulce base contains the garage for street maintenance. Level 2 contains the garage for trams, shuttles, tunnel boring machines, and disc maintenance. The Greys and Reptoid species have had ancient conflicts with the Nordic humans from other space societies, and may be staging here for future conflict. Penny Harper, in the January 1990 issue of Whole Life Times, wrote an article in which she referred to the ufologist and prominent physicist Paul Bennewitz. Paul Bennewitz's whereabouts unknown. Paul was a scientist investigating an abduction case. A woman and her son drove down a road in the southwest. The woman witnessed aliens mutilating a calf. The aliens captured both mother and son, taking them into an underground installation. The woman saw many frightening things, apparently much of it similar to what abductee Krista Tilton and others had witnessed. Yet they, mother and son, also saw human body parts floating in a vat of amber liquid. After a horrifying ordeal, the woman and her son were taken back to their car. Bennewitz was able to determine that there is a secret alien base beneath Dulce, New Mexico. He wrote the Dulce Report and sent it to the civilian UFO group called ARPO, Aerial Phenomena Research Organization. Bennewitz was then committed to the New Mexico State Hospital for the Mentally Ill, where he was given electroshock therapy. When he was discharged, he publicly stated that he would not have anything to do with UFOs. He is a recluse today, but still alive, last I heard. Update from this report. Paul Benowitz died June 23, 2003. A Navajo Indian legend speaks of an ancient migration involving a cavernous realm below the Four Corners area. The Hopi speak of a similar legend involving an alleged opening, sometimes described as a hill and sometimes as a pond, covering the path. The Hopi emergence point is called the Sipapu or Sipapnu, and it is said to be near the convergence of the Colorado and Little Colorado rivers. According to the Hopi tradition, not all people who dwell in the cavern world came up with them. Others chose to remain below. As for the Navajos, they state that at one time the nations Navajo, Pueblo, Coyoteros, and white people lived together underground in the heart of a mountain near the river San Juan. Their only food was meat, which they had in abundance, for all kinds of game were close up with them in the cave. But their light was dim and only endured for a few hours each day. Then the men and animals began to come up from their cave, and their coming up required several days. First came the Navajos. No sooner had they reached the surface than they commenced gaming at pet roll, their favorite game. Then came the Pueblos and other Indians, who cropped their hair and built houses. Lastly came the white people, who started off at once from the rising sun and were lost from sight for many winters. While these nations lived underground, they spoke one tongue. But with the light of day and the level of the earth came many languages. If there is even a grain of truth to this ancient legend, then it would seem the caverns in which southwestern Indians formerly and allegedly lived were void of the nefarious influence of the reptilian humanoids, who apparently infested the subsurface levels from the south. But we will make one comment, and that is the amazing coincidence between this legend and the more modern accounts of cavernous labyrinths below this very same region of Four Corners. As they say, where there's smoke, there's probably fire. Such migration legends concerning subsurface caverns are not restricted to the Southwest, however, but many of the Indians of the southern states and New England in fact repeat the same theme almost verbatim. Nor should we limit such accounts to North America, since they are profusely throughout the whole world, as we've seen in earlier files. Again, we quote from Commander X, who stated, "From my own intelligence work within the military, I can say with all certainty that one of the main reasons the public has been kept in total darkness about the reality of UFOs and aliens is that the truth of the matter actually exists too close to home to do anything about." How could a spokesman for the Pentagon dare admit that 5,000 or 10,000 feet underground exists an entire world that is foreign to a belief structure we have had for centuries? How could, for example, our fastest bomber be any challenge to those aerial invaders, when we can only guess about the routes they take to the surface, eluding radar as they fly so low, headed back to their underground lair? The Greys or Ebies have established a fortress spreading out to other parts of the U.S. via means of a vast underground tunnel system that has virtually existed before recorded history. The following document, among others, originated from a U.S. intelligence worker who has been missing for quite some time. Concerned family members discovered this document in a locker in which the missing intelligence worker apparently kept some of his papers. The document may have something to do with his disappearance, though exactly what connection this might be is uncertain. Copies of this and other documents have eventually ended up in the hands of several researchers as a result of one investigator who was approached by the family of the missing agent and given the documents. This source stated that this family was extremely disturbed not only by the disappearance, but about the nature of the documents themselves and the role they may have played in connection with the disappearance. If we are to fear the worst concerning his situation, then we hope the following document does justice in vindicating the memory of this patriot. Perhaps this document will serve as fuel for the growing human resistance against the draconian socialist elements which are attempting to corrupt the very foundation of our society. In the copy of the document, which is quoted here, some annotations were made. These seem to have been corrections on the manuscript made by Benowitz. These will be indicated by an asterisk. Summary of notes taken by Jim McCampbell concerning telephone interviews with Dr. Paul Benowitz. This is Jim McCampbell making a recording of a remarkable episode on July 13th, 1984. It has to do with a UFO base, cattle mutilations, advanced weaponry, contact with aliens, etc. The episode began about a week ago when I received a little semi-annual periodical titled STIGMATA. Its number is 21, the first half of 1984. This little bulletin is prepared by Thomas Adams. He has a rather lengthy article. One finds point of interest on page 9. I suppose the only way to pursue this is to read what he has here, as it is fundamental to the entire story. Quoting, "In May of 1980, a most interesting event occurred in northern New Mexico, an event similar in many aspects to the Dorada case. A mother and her young son were driving on a rural highway near Cameron, New Mexico. They observed two or more craft, just as Judy Dortray did. They observed a calf being abducted. Both observers were themselves abducted and taken on a separate craft to what was apparently an underground installation, where the woman witnessed the mutilation of the calf. Asterisk. The woman witnessed the mutilation in the field. Dead animal taken with them. It has been alleged that she also observed a vat containing unidentified asterisk cattle body parts floating in the liquid, and another vat containing the body of a male human. The woman was subjected to an examination, and it has been further alleged that small metallic objects were implanted into her body as well as into her son's body. More than one source has informed us that CAT scans have confirmed the presence of these implants. Paul Benowitz, president of his own scientific company in Albuquerque, an investigator with the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, has been the principal investigator of the case. Interviewed in his office in April 1983. Benowitz reports that through regressive hypnosis of the mother and child, and his own follow-up investigation, including the communications received via his computer terminal, which ostensibly is a UFO-related source, he was able to determine the location of the underground facility a kilometer underground beneath the Jacarla Apalachee Indian Reservation near Dulce, New Mexico. Since 1976, one of these areas hardest hit by mutilations, coincidentally or whatever. The mother and son, by the way, were returned back to their car that night. Since the incident, they have suffered repeated trauma and difficulties as they attempt to recover from the episode. We pass this along because the account is, of course, most critical if true, but we're not in a position to confirm the alleged findings. Hopefully, more information regarding this incident will be aired in the near future. We can only consider such reports while continuing to seek the evidence to refute or confirm. That is the end of this remarkable quotation from STIGMATA. I got in touch with Dr. Benowitz by telephone and indicated that I had seen this reference to him and his work. I wanted to find out whether he was being misrepresented or whatever. It is rather mind-boggling, and here is the substance of that telephone conversation. He is a physicist and started over 4 years ago to determine in his own mind whether UFOs exist or do not. He has gotten much more deeply involved than he ever intended. It has caused him a great deal of trouble from the government intelligence groups. He has pictures from the location. He went with a highway patrol officer and they saw a UFO take off from Mesa at the location. He obtained photographs, and what he calls launch ships were 330 feet long and 130 feet across. The cattle rancher named Gomez and he went back to this location, which is Mesa, and saw a surveillance vehicle which was about 5 feet by 10 feet, like a satellite. He said he had been using a Polaroid camera, then got a Hasselblad to produce much better pictures. He set up a monitoring station and observed that the UFOs are over the area. He had been dealing heavily with Major Edwards somebody, asterisk, security commander, who was with Menanzo security, and two, asterisk, my wife and I, of them saw 4 objects outside of a warhead storage area at a range of about 2,500 feet and obtained movies of them. He now has about 6,000 feet of movie footage, of which 5,000 feet is in Super 8. The objects have the ability to cloak, like Cloak and Dagger, like Cover Up, and he says that they can cause themselves to go invisible by a field that caused the light waves to bend around the object, and that one sees the sky behind them. He continued the fact that the woman was picked up when she accidentally observed the calf being abducted. He had paid for a pathological work and medical doctor work. The pathologist is a former head of microbiology department of New Mexico University. They have done CAT scans to show that the woman and her son did in fact have implants in their bodies. Asterisk. We confirmed the woman, not her son. She has a vaginal disease like Streptococcus bulbi. I tried many antibodies to destroy the bacteria. That it had survived off antibodies themselves. The aliens kept hassling her. Asterisk. Still true to the date. Paul kept the woman and her mother at his house, and the UFOs were flying overhead constantly. There is no ESP involved, but it's just plain physics. They beam down, asterisk. They send a beam down, not beam down. They can communicate through this beam. She picked up their transmission. He devised a means of communication based on her alphabetic code. 1 is equal to no, and 2 being yes. Through this code, he has been able to talk to the aliens. He then computerized the system that would reject extraneous inputs. He said they can be very threatening and malevolent. He then told the OSI of the Air Force, and he had requested to give, asterisk, did give, several presentations to high-level Air Force people in briefings on the subject, wing-level command, and many others, including this fellow Edwards. And he took a helicopter to the site. Asterisk, no, twice to the site. First by OSI agent, second by a Colonel Carpenter. It turned out that the wing commander, after a presentation that this fellow made, then took a helicopter to a site and made photographs. He says that you can see saucers on the ground. He says there is a kind of cone, a large cone, and larger vehicles come and land on top of the cone, with the top of the cone filling into a hole into the bottom. There is an elevator inside of the cone that goes down into the mountain or ground about 1 kilometer. You can see the aliens running around the base, getting into vehicles and stuff. They use small vehicles to get around that have no wheels. They are rectangular in shape and they levitate. They do not show up in color because they are highly reflective, but in black and white they are visible. He says that there are beam weapons that are floating in strategic locations, and there is a road into the base. He obtained an infrared photos of the area from an altitude of 14,000 feet. There is a level highway going into the area that is 36 feet wide. It's a government road, i.e. part of the off-limits road that goes through the Ute Reservation on the Colorado-New Mexico border. One can see the telemetry trailers and buildings that are 5-sided buildings with a dome. It is standard military procedure. There are many guard points and stakes, and there are launch domes that one can see. Next to the launch dome, he saw a black limousine and another at some distance off. Asterisk, apparently. The careful measurements show that the limousine was the same length of his Lincoln Town Car. It's a CIA vehicle. Also, there was a blue van. He has been cautioned about these limousines as they will run you off the road if you try to get in the area. And in fact, somebody has been killed in that manner. To the north is a launch site. There are 2 wrecked ships there. They are 36 feet with wings, and one can see oxygen and hydrogen tanks. There are 4 cylindrical objects, Socorro type, 2 carrying something while flying. The whole operation is based on a government agreement and a technology trade. We get out of it atomic ships, and they are operated by plutonium. The Cash Landrum case was one of them. The doors jammed open and the neutron radiation came out. They are based in Kirtland Air Force Base and Hollow Man Air Force Base. Asterisk, no. Only know of one based at HAFB, which I assume is Hollow Man Air Force Base, and someplace in Texas, possibly Fort Hood, Texas. A guess only. He said the government is paying the hospital bills for the Cash Landrum victims. Asterisk, OSI input. Found out later, less someone is covering, not true. Refueling of the plutonium is accomplished at Los Alamos. He had pictures of this base back to 1948, and it has been there starting in 1948. Pictures in 1962, you can see many saucers and the base and truck. The road was passed off to the local inhabitants as a lumber contract. He has photographs, I believe, of the firing of a beam weapon that, ? In 2 directions. That would be necessary on a flying saucer. The reaction forces would impede the vehicle. He has computed the speed of the flying saucer at 15,000 miles per hour and indicates that the pilots, asterisk, of ours, are from NSA, the National Security Agency. The alien, i.e. one particular group, have had atomic propulsion systems for 48 years, and the saucers themselves operate on an electric charge basis having to do with crystal semiconductor and asterisk, maybe a super lattice. I think he said as you increase the voltage, the current goes down. At present, there are 6 to 8 vehicles, maybe up to 10 over the area, and something up to 100. They can be seen in the clouds. They go up to the cumulus clouds and produce nitrogen nitride. Asterisk. I assume or speculate it is this. You will see black spots in the clouds. They eat holes in the clouds. If you can see black spots in the clouds, then you can tell that a vehicle is in there. He says that they come from 6 different cultures, and his communications, i.e. accessing the computers, etc., of underground bases. He learned that some of the binary system, possibly Zeta Reticuli, and from distances up to and larger than 32 light years away, they also, asterisk, appear to have 1 to 3 ships in orbit at about 50,000 kilometer altitude, asterisk, based upon data. He had to form the words to try to communicate, and he produced a vocabulary of 627 words in a matrix form and used a computer. The flying saucers, asterisk, we see, are limited to operation in the atmosphere. Now, with regard to the cattle problem, the aliens are using the DNA from the cattle and are making humanoids. He got pictures of their video screen. Some of the creatures are animal-like. Some are near human. Some are human and short with large heads. Hybrids. They grow like embryos. After the embryos become active by a year of training, presumably that is required for them to become operational when they die. They go back into the tank. Their parts are recovered. In 1979, something happened and the base was closed. There was an agreement over weapons and our people were chased out. More than 100 people were involved. Someplace later, he indicates further details on this point. The base is 4,000 feet long, and our helicopters are going in there all the time. When it became known that he was familiar with all of this, the mutilation stopped. They are taking humanoid embryos out of this base to somewhere else. I asked if it was Albuquerque or Los Alamos, but he said he didn't know. Note, January 8th, 1986. Looks like the Albuquerque, subterranean base below Albuquerque. He said there are still quite a few helicopters in operation. They fly at night. Asterisk. All unmarked. He went up there himself in a helicopter, and the OSI briefed the copter pilot, and he thought perhaps the copter pilot himself was an undercover man. They saw helicopter pads up there, Vietnam type, with bearing markers, trees pushed off from the location. It is such a wild area, he said. He agreed to send me the coordinates of this base. Regarding abductions of people, they pick out medium to low IQ personnel. They are able to scope out each one. So we can do the same thing with electromagnetic spectroanalyzers. They pick up these people, then put implants into them and take tissue samples, including ovum from the women and sperm from the men, and DNA. They can program these people as slaves to do whatever they wish, and they will have no memory of it. They, the hardcore types, staunchly refuse to be x-rayed or hypnotically regressed. You can regress them because of their eyes. He says particular look in the eyes and a funny smile. Hynek knows about all of this, and has been in contact with Coral Lorenz. He regards Hynek as a threat. Asterisk. Not really. I just think he is still a government cover. At his house, he showed Hynek films and out in the backyard a flying saucer. He asked Hynek about his view with regard to abductions, as to how many people might have been abducted. Hynek unhesitatingly said about 1 out of 40. He said that many people come to this door to see him, just out of the blue, and he sees scars on the back of their necks, that previous old scars are easy to detect, and that new ones are hard to detect. He feels that this is a sickening situation. The aliens have gone wild and use hypodermics. And note, he has been paralyzed 4 times and has been hit 250 times by hypodermics. He says they knock you cold and they do whatever they want to do. And above points have been verified medically. A man came to see him with top secret documents that dated in the 1950s, indicating that if anybody found out about all of this, they would kill them. He was asked, "Doesn't that bother you?" He said, "No, it didn't." He said he sent in some film to Kodak, and there were 7 rolls. They were Ektachrome G, which could not be processed locally, so they had to go to Kodak. He does all the film work commercially, so that nobody can claim that he had monkeyed with the film. His film came back, but one of them was plain Ektachrome, but asterisk was missing for 2 months when received. 9 feet was missing, and this was close-ups of the UFO that he had taken. The missing pictures of the 9 feet showed up in a top secret document that he studied, and the code name is Aquarius, and it is a project of the National Security Agency. Asterisk, I was told NASA. They're the ones that kept his film and copied it with deletions on Ektachrome and sent it back. Asterisk, I suspect. There have been indirect threats by the Air Force intelligence against him. The locations of the base is 2.5 miles northwest of Dulce and almost overlooks the town. It's up on the Mesa. We discussed the similarity between everything we had talked about here and the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind. He said he speculated that seemed to be a plan of disclosure. That is, the movie. The coordinates of the location are not far off from the mountain where the actual base looks much like the mountain in the movie. Here is what we got in the trade-off. We got an atomic technology, the atomic flying ships, several of them. The first one wrecked on the ground, and it can be seen and photographed from the air. The second one wrecked. The third one was wrecked. Apparently, this last one was repaired and was one that was in Houston, near Houston in Cashlandrum case. The second item was that we got out of it beam weapons, the beam technology, and third, asterisk, I speculate, is the thought beam. That is the means by which communication is accomplished. It is electrostatic in character with magnetic component, and it is the only way of communicating with people. They have the implants in order to use it. The crash that occurred at the base when there was a disturbance of some sort, the aliens killed 66 of our people and 44 got away. Note, if Benowitz was able to link to the alien computer network and discovered certain things, there is the possibility that the aliens may have used this in reverse to feed him with false information. as is their nature. As for the altercation at the base, other human sources have confirmed this, as we have seen. Over an argument, they turned on us. He was familiar with what the aliens called MPS, which means manipulations per sequence, an electrostatic field that can be manipulated into many configurations, and the craft can stall. In order to prevent this, the field is adjusted once every 40 milliseconds. He studied the trails from the UFO, and they seem to break down into a pulse rate of 62 per second, based upon the color of the movie pictures. There seems to be a blast of light and spectral component and composition in there, with a bow wave in front of the UFO with nitrogen showing green and oxygen showing blue, but with the saucer being invisible. They can run into a car or airplane, and this bow wave will destroy them. Rockets can hit this bow wave and be destroyed. They can't penetrate it. At White Sands, he was shown pictures of an F-15 shooting rockets with a missile at a target, and the saucer came up behind the missile, 30 feet behind, then flew through the explosion. He didn't know what the purpose of the demonstration was, but suspected it might just show how invulnerable they are. Sometimes the saucers get in trouble and they are consumed in some kind of way. When he went up to Dulce in a helicopter, they landed and left some equipment there. But then when they came back, the pilot was extremely nervous. Paul wanted to land on the base, but the pilot wouldn't do that. They came back to Dulce and landed at a small strip there, where they found two large Huey helicopters. The highway patrolman in charge there, named Valdez, went aboard one of the choppers, and they found them to be full of commandos. They established a total of 75 commandos, fully armed with M16s and rocket launchers. They only had shoulder patches, and on the helicopter had no identification other than numbers. The helicopters were part of the project called Blue Light, and they were from Fort Carson, Colorado, *OSI input. When they left, they were escorted by these two large Huey helicopters. As they were flying along, in the background they saw rise up one of the advanced space technology vehicles that looked like a manta ray, with a negative dihedral and projections coming down. It flew vertically past two accompanying helicopters. Paul feels that it is imperative that this information be released because he feels that this is unconstitutional for the government to be involved in such an arrangement that invades our privacy of the individuals by the implantations. He said that once they have been tampered with by the aliens, they are never the same. So it appears that for the privilege of collecting the biological materials in the mutilation of cattle and the abductions and operations on board the craft, the government has allowed this to go on, and even to assist for the privilege of getting the nuclear flight technology. Plus also the embryos which are flown out of the base. Paul strikes me as being an extremely conservative, extremely knowledgeable, and reliable scientist who was intimately familiar with the sophisticated laboratory equipment. His is thoroughly scientific and reliable. Jim McCampbell evaluation. I inquired about the other bases that were referred to in the STIGMATA report or article. He said all he knew was one was to the south, One was to the west and one was to the east. He doesn't want to know anything more about it. I discussed the prospect of using the paper in the MUFON proceedings to try and find the center of the gravity for the mutilation cases of those maps that run from about 1972 to 1982 or 83. The word gravity triggered in his mind another connection having to do with the Department of Interior. That has a gravity department, and they do in fact survey the United States and publish maps indicating the gravity contours. There is a very weak gravity at the site near Dulce. He said that the craft are very sensitive to the gravity levels, and that suggested that perhaps another site might be able to be located relative to weak gravity. He also indicated that objects fly in a wobbly way. His pictures have shown that. He says like the rocking of a boat. He has measured many right angle turns and also full 180-degree turns in the 20th of a second, with the objects still inside the bow wave. He has also observed and photographed the objects or lights moving in a triangular pattern and square patterns. He says high-powered radar can interfere with them. I reported on the meeting that we had on Sunday afternoon and raised some questions that came out of that meeting. One of them was why not remove the implant? He said that this had been discussed and the lady witness finds that acceptable if she can be assured that there can be no nerve damage. He then went on into great detail, which exceeds my knowledge of anatomy, in describing the location of the implants. One appears to be adjacent to and external to the cortex, which I think he indicated was at the base of the brain. This will wrap up part 2 as I am about halfway through Battles Beneath the Earth, but there are a few things that I want to talk about that were mentioned in this. Now, there will be 2 different versions of this because I have to be careful what I put on YouTube regarding certain subjects. So, the edited version will be on YouTube. For the complete version, video-wise, check out my BitChute channel. As well as for the audio version, that will be on my website. The big elephant in the room regarding this section is the obvious religious overtones, as well as the time frame that is obviously wrong. Now, my thoughts regarding this is the time frame being pushed back, I strongly suspect, I cannot prove, but I strongly suspect that things were delayed because of not being able or an inability to get the guns away from the American people. Because you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of the mass shootings started to happen around the 90s. And I think that was intentional in order to try and bring about this push to disarm the population. The attacks on the Second Amendment. Because it is far easier to take over and control an unarmed populace than it is to try and take over and control a population that is armed. Because if you have an armed population, you are going to have a very blatant war, especially if you're trying to bring about a socialistic type of New World Order government. You're going to have those that are resisting that willing to fight and die to try and prevent that. Now, bear in mind, this idea of a mass evacuation and everything mentioned in this is what would be termed an alien agenda. It is not the agenda of quote-unquote God, unless you think of your God as an extraterrestrial. The thing is, there was also mention of what are called the infernals. I have no idea what that is. I understand the religious will look at that and be, that is either the jinn of Islam or the demons of Christianity, but I do not have enough information from what I'm seeing to be able to say these infernals are this or that. I don't know. And I'm not going to make shit up like the religious do. If I don't know something, I will say, I don't know. While I can't prove that those that are evacuated are going to be taken to underground bases where they will be the subject of genetic experimentation, I can't prove that that will be what happens, but that seems to be the most logical conclusion. Because, Christians, you can't go into the sky bodily. The higher you go up in the atmosphere, the oxygen content drops and you would suffocate. And if you would be stupid enough to try to go into space without a spacesuit, you would die within about 15 seconds. Your blood would boil and a whole lot of nasty shit would happen to you. It would not be a pretty death. But the end result would be the same. You would die. Now, if you want to use the term of a spirit, number one, that's not how you're going into this sky, because you can't see a spirit or Casper, or as what was mentioned earlier in this document, a bioplasmic body. We can't see that visually. If that would be what would be going on, be aware. You're going to die. It's written in your Bible, flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God. So if you're going to be taken by your God, you're not going to have people suddenly disappearing. You're going to have people suddenly dying. It will be mass death, not a mass evacuation. A mass evacuation means you're being taken by someone, be it the government or be it an extraterrestrial race. And where you would be taken, while I can't prove it, I strongly suspect it would be into an underground base, possibly even Nightmare Hall, to be part of the genetic experiments going on. Because there's nothing in what I have read that would indicate to me that those that would be doing an evacuation would be anything other than the Greys or the reptilians. There is no mention of any plan from the Nordic or any other alien race that may be interested in helping us. From the information that I have, we are not privy to the plans that they would have, only to the aspect that some could be using Earth as a staging area for a future conflict. The thing is, I think it is important to keep in mind that what we should use is common sense and logic. Because the things that are going on, especially with the way things are since last year, the intent and the deception, it should be obvious. I did find it interesting that there were Native American stories of people living in caves. I don't know how much of that is true. If anybody is Native American and listening to this, if you can either leave a comment or call my Skype and talk to me directly, if you can confirm or refute those Navajo or whatnot Native American stories. To hear the rest of my commentary on this, either go to my BitChute or my website, because this is as far as I can go and have things posted on YouTube. Feel free to leave your thoughts and comments in the comments section. Talk to you later, people.